Okay.
This video was made to explain the process of me editing the 2.1 Awards nominees video and the 2.1 Awards results video. I've managed to learn a lot more about editing throughout the year to animate this, and I would like to bestow some of the experiences I had. I'm first going to start off by saying the story of how I managed to become the editor of the 2.1 Awards. It's a pretty long story, so buckle up. So I was in charge of putting all the sound effects and audio in Prelude, as you can see. Where I acquire mostly every sound is from royalty-free sound effects at freesound.org, because Viprin needs his fucking money. It was kind of a pain in the ass to find the right sound effects, and I distinctly remember the traumatic experience of spending 4 hours looking for the sound effect of paper falling. There's some iconic sound Easter eggs I put throughout, from the Minecraft death sound to a Pokemon sound effect to the obvious JoJo references. You can't get mad at me for that. Their sound effects is so fucking good. One of my greatest weaknesses in editing actually is mastering audio and making it sound clean, which I know, a complete surprise considering the perfectly normal audio from the answer video. So to compensate for this, when all was said and done, I gave the file to Viprin, who gave it to the Devin, an actually good sound music person who made the OST of Prelude, to tell me where I should make adjustments. Another thing I did for Prelude was make some of the little backgrounds where I needed that little extra touch, such as when Husey is crying like a little bitch, the camera moving toward the clock tower, and the transformation scene. At this point of editing, I had no idea how to use After Effects, so for the speedline backgrounds, I just loosely followed a tutorial and somehow managed to make it not look like total dog shit. And that's all for my part on what I did with Prelude. It goes without saying that Rafer put a tremendous amount of more effort into the animation than the Devin with his sick-ass OST music. Props to them. Now, let's talk about the main part of what I did, Hey, here's an extremely important tip that I wish future me would rip past me spine over. Do not ever use the fucking Reslin font. Ever. This is the shittiest fucking font I ever had the displeasure of working with. Do you know how shitty this font was to work with? The kerning was all messed up, making the I's and L's too close to the rest of the letters, which resorts to me having to move every single individual I and L slightly to the right so it doesn't look like shit. It only had lowercase letters and no special characters such as the fucking apostrophe or the quotation symbol or literally anything useful. I literally had to get another font, download a font editing program, figure out how to use that, and put those characters into Okay, anyway, besides that, here's two fundamental things I use multiple times in the video to make it look clean. The first thing is making stuff glow, and in order to make stuff glow, all you need to do is get a copy of it and make it blur behind the original thing. The second thing is making a grid to make things evenly spaced and centered. This helps with making things evenly spaced and centered. The background here in retrospect wasn't too hard to make, but at the time it was a struggle too. The GD background part of it was made by getting the GD background and moving it below a color gradient overlay. The custom ground I made was by skewing a grid, using the waveform effect to make it wiggle a little bit, and animated it to go up. I used the same color overlay for the ground. Now for the particles, I made 3 shapes, a circle, a triangle, and a square. I used particle roll in After Effects in order to make it go up and used 3 particle layers, one for the circle, one for the triangle, and the other for a square. This obviously took a very long time to render because of its inefficiency, so thank God I had a year to make this video. I rendered this composition as a transparent video and placed it over the background on Premiere. Alas, the nominee background is done. I later found out while rendering previews that this background was extremely resource demanding, so I had to render it alone as a video, and it took a total of 2 days to render the 20 minutes of background as an MP4. Since I obviously can't leave my computer rendering for 2 days straight, I cut it up into 10 pieces of 2 minutes. Viprin figured out how I wanted the layouts of the nominee video to be and sent them in these 2 neat little messages. Feel free to pause the video and read it for yourself. A, B, B2, and D were relatively easy to make. I just made a white rectangle in Premiere Pro with the title feature and put the required video below it. Then I put the level name and author depending on the layout letter it is. I evenly spaced the frame and the info with the grid overlay. G and F were a little more challenging. With G and F I had to add a bunch of different information, so it was kind of a pain to evenly align everything and update it for each different person. Specifically for G, I spent forever trying to get the icons as high quality as possible with gdbrowser.com and gdprofiles.com, but they weren't good enough. Viprin just got Dang Theory to make the icons at the end. With C and also part of E2, I had to figure out how to make scrolling text. I did it by having a list of all the things a nominee needed as a text box, and then reduce the opacity of the sides by using mask feather. Then I used the spherize effect to spherize it and animate it was in the center of the text box with keyframes. Now, E and E2 were big boy territory. I have never created an audio spectrum before and barely knew how to use After Effects. It was fucking torture, but I followed multiple tutorials to get it right, and eventually when I got the hang of it, made it more pretty. There was a lot of experimentation going on for these layouts, and I'm pretty proud with the results, honestly. For E, I added black audio spectrums at the screen to make it look prettier, and as mentioned before, E2 only had the circular spectrum with the scrolling text I did for C. Mind you, all of this took months for me to figure out, but it all came pretty decent. It severely improved my editing skills a ton, and the proof of it is in the credits background. While I created the background for the nominee video in the span of a couple months, the credits background took me only 4 hours, and it was entirely created with After Effects. What I did to get cube particles is a little bit complex. I got a lot of 2.1 cubes and put each of them as one single frame in a composition. Then I used the particle world effect in another composition. I used the particle world settings to make it so that each particle is a cube of the frame it was generated at. This makes the particles look like they are random cubes, because each particle takes a random frame to generate. Now, the cube pillars in the background are also a little bit complex. A way to explain what I did is something like this. Let's say there are 2 cubes. I put an expression, which is a piece of code, so that when the first cube goes up, the second cube goes down. I repeated this effect multiple times to make a row of cubes doing this. So now it looks like each cube is going alternate directions. Then I repeated this row of cubes to make it look like pillars. These are basically the 2 main things that make up the background. I bamboozled around to make the cubes look prettier with pulsing colors, but that's pretty much how I made it. And that's pretty much it for the nominee video. Viprin and I changed various things and fixed some bugs. It was all fine and dandy, and then the vid premiered and it was great and amazing and we had a grand old time. So at this point, the process of me working on the nominee video is from around January 1st to December 14th. That's around 347 days of work. Now imagine my surprise when I had to make the results video in 2 weeks, where I spent 1/4 of my time being busy with school, 1/4 of my time being busy with real life, 1/4 of my time sleeping, and the other 4 procrastinating. Yeah, it wasn't really gonna go well, right? But somehow it fucking did, and y'all have seen the video, right? It's good. I feel like the amount I have learned about editing during those 2 weeks is equivalent to what I have learned in the other 49. The time crunch made it an insane challenge to adapt to and overcome. For the first week I was mostly busy and couldn't come up with a main background idea. So it was already going off to a good start as I was slightly freaking out. A couple days before the deadline, I eventually had the time to experiment on what I wanted the credits background to be. I used particle world with the shapes and made it come out from the bottom. It was kind of a pain to position it to make it look the way I wanted to, but I eventually did. Then I changed the colors of the particle's birth to the particle's death from red to blue. It already looked pretty nice in my opinion. At the end, I experimented some more and put a checkered background with a red and blue gradient. Meanwhile, I still had no idea what I wanted to do for the results background, but then I had a eureka moment of what I wanted, something circular, something similar to this background in B. So near the deadline, I stayed up until 5 AM to create a somewhat rough draft of what I wanted to make. It looked like this. I made the columns by making a gigantic vertical composition of trophies and making it move down. The way I made this circle is a bit complicated too. I used a cube and made it go around the circle while rotating it so that it doesn't look weird. Then I got the next cube to have the same properties as this cube, but with a specific expression. What it does basically is make the position and rotation of this cube to be the other cube in the future. I wasn't exactly sure how many cubes I needed to make it even and how far in the future it should be, so I used a slider to adjust how far it should be and found a number of seconds. Then I made each cube golden, added a vignette, and made it look shiny with the CC glass effect. I did this step first though. With this background, what I was planning to do was make a pie chart of the results in the middle. Thinking about it now, a pie chart is kind of flawed and anticlimactic since you figured out who the winner would be at the end. Anyway, Viprin didn't like it at all, so because of the time constraint, we just decided to use the credits background and turn it gold, so that was always a good sleep. However, it wasn't a complete waste since I used the effects to make it gold for the text, the frame, the trophies, and pretty much everything else. After making everything else, I had to figure out how to make the bars. I put the 4 nominees in the order of how they were shown and positioned them. I categorized the first, second, third, and fourth place nominees into their own respective compositions to reduce complications. I did the same for the bars, and doing both of these made moving the bars to their respective nominees significantly easier. Basic math here, if we say 100% is here, then the width of first place is always 100%. You divide 100 by what the first place percentage is to get the winner multiplier. You multiply the rest of the nominee percentages by this multiplier to get what the width of the rectangle should be. Animating all of this was a huge fucking pain. I needed to use 4 separate sliders to keep track of the nominees' percentages. I also had to use the graph editor to make the bars have identical Bezier curves so that the winner isn't given away. But do you want to know what was an even bigger pain in my ass? The percent. Now, this is where expressions dramatically fucking helped. First off, the source text. How did I make those percentages? Let's say that this slider is an exact percentage of what the width of the bar is. I then made the variable win, which is that slider, in decimal form. So if the slider is 42.66666, the variable win is 0.426666. I then multiplied the percentage of the nominee votes by win, then by 10, rounded it, and then divided it by 10. Then I added a percentage sign, to be cute. The Y position of the text was just always moved to the middle of the bar. Since the bars are categorized as I said before, it made it a lot easier to move them to their respective places. And I don't even know what I did for the exposition. Look at this fucking garbage. You think I'm gonna explain this? It's just a bunch of experimentation where its purpose is to move it to the right edge of the rectangle and then 90 pixels more to the left so that it's inside. I spent the last couple of days pulling all-nighters to finish all this garbage in time, and I'm surprised I even managed to figure all of this out with the time constraint. Anyway, after all of this was done, I used dynamic linking to move everything in its right place on Premiere Pro. There was like a day left by the time I finished, so I couldn't render the video all at once since it would take too much time. What I planned to do was to render each composition individually so that they would all just be transparent videos. And rendering transparent videos on top of each other is way faster than rendering a bunch of After Effects compositions on top of each other. Mostly everything was rendered already because I rendered these compositions overnight while I was doing the project. Smart. But at December 27, I was planning to use the night to render the credits background and the bars, which is the most time-consuming render. I put it in Media Encoder and had my little baby sleep. God, I'm glad I had enough time to render those fucking files. Now I just have to replace it and then I'll be finished in time. Imagine if nothing actually happened. Okay, so I later found out that the reason is because Media Encoder had this freezing bug in the 2019 version. I have always used the 2018 version up to 2 days before the deadline for dynamic link. Not my fault. Okay, after fixing it at 4 AM, everything is rendered. For real now. Oh, the transparent videos are not transparent. Okay, thank God there's an opacity option to make the black screen go away. Now the BG actually shows and everything is looking how it's supposed to. And now finally, I can finally fucking render after the delay and finally be finished with my life. Okay, so I later found out again that the reasoning for why it crashed at 99% is because Premiere wouldn't render the last few seconds. It would just return a software error. The same thing happened while rendering the credits, but I originally thought it was a Media Encoder bug. So I thought it was a specific bug, but it just turned out to be another bug. I rendered the last few seconds of the video and replaced it. I had no idea if it was gonna work. It was basically a 50-50 chance. The video was getting close to finishing rendering, and then... 98, 98, oh, 99, 99. Oh shit, is it actually gonna render? Let's go! Let's go! I would like to say thank you to Viprin for giving me the opportunity to edit the awards and sticking with me throughout the time I was editing. It helped improve my editing a godly amount, and taught me a lot of little tips and tricks to make my editing process faster and more efficient. Shout out to Orinami, Arb, and all the others for sticking with me during the delay and helped alleviate some of the stress I had during that time. I feel like that I grossly oversimplified some of the editing I did here, so if you want to contact me with editing questions, you can hit me up on my Discord and I'll be happy to respond. I hope you enjoyed this video and that it helped show how the video was made and the process I was going through. Thanks for watching, and make sure to